Last year, I did a video where I detailed the top 50 teams of the entire season. This year, I'm doing the exact same thing. These are in order the top 50 teams of the 2022-2023 season. This is not based on their expectations or how they should have performed. This is based simply on what their results are and how they stack against other teams. Number 50 is our team Solary. They got 15th in Europe. They actually tied for 15th with Fufadop. They played 7 different regionals, and their best finish was top 8. This was a roster of K-Dop, Fairy Peak, and Shawset with Finish as their coach. And number 49 is Axel. You might be wondering why Axel is higher than Solary, considering they had the exact same statistics, just in different regions. Axel getting 15th in North America. They played 7 regionals, best finish top 8. They had players of Toasty, Gimmick, and Taroko at the end of the season. Their coach was Ronskin the entire time. And they also had a former player of Ajax who played with them for the fall and winter split. The reason they're above Solary is just because they had more consistent performances throughout the season, and Solary didn't really do much of anything in the spring split aside from show up to the invitational that they got qualified for. So that's why I gave Axel the slight edge there, but that is them clocking at number 49. Number 48, you have Suh. This is a 10th place team in Europe. They played 8 regionals, and their best finish was top 8. They were formerly Sonics. This was Tho, Mike Boy, and Hibbs. They also played with Toxic and Metzenaris throughout the season. They were also coached by Fruity for a little bit throughout the season, but he ended up getting dropped before the spring split, I believe. The reason this team is 48th is also a big primary thing that I didn't take into account was their Gamers 8 qualification run. They are qualified for Gamers 8, so we will end up seeing them in the tournament this weekend. However, I just wasn't really impressed. They didn't make much waves throughout the season, even with their best finish being a top 8. Number 47 is Lakeshow. This is an interesting one because they actually disbanded after one split, but they were kind of headlining OCE there for a little bit. They played in 3 regionals. They disbanded in December, and they made 1 OCE regional final. This was a roster of Sicky, Mock, and Hunter. Mock would go on to join another team. I think it might have been placeholders. Don't quote me on that. There's another video where I detail that entire saga. Sicky would end up retiring after this split, and Hunter made his way over to Pioneers. So that's why this roster ended up disbanding. But considering how well they did in their first split, I felt like it was necessary to give them a shout in here, and they clock in at number 47. Number 46, you have Guild. They were 13th in Europe. They played 5 different regionals, and their best finish was a top 6. One of the main reasons I had them above a team like Suh or a team like Solary was mainly because of that top 6 finish. They had that really good run in one of the spring regionals to make top 6, including upsetting Oxygen at the time. This is a roster of Luis P, Acro, and Gom with their coach of Impulse. And I'm curious to see what these guys do since they were definitely trending upwards towards the end of the season. It'll be curious to see where these players or where this team ends up going next year. Number 45, you have Monaco. They were 12th in Europe. They played 6 regionals. Their best finish was top 8. Unfortunately, I don't have in here. They were also under the banner of Aogiri for a little bit. This is a roster of Ocelon, Stizzy, and Dying. They used to play with VK Salin back in the fall and winter. And their coach was X Tezraz by the end of the season. But they did qualify for a top 8 and 6 regionals, so that puts them at number 45. Number 44, you have Williams Resolve. They were 11th in Europe. They played 6 different regionals, and they placed top 8. I believe they placed top 8 a couple of times. This was Breezy Flame and Noasaki. Noasaki is a name that was touted to be on the up and up for a while, and I'm curious to see where his career goes specifically next year. But they were coached by Ethan throughout the season, and they had some consistent appearances throughout the entirety of the season. Number 43 is M80. They were 13th in North America. They played 7 different regionals, with their best finish being a top 8. They were actually formerly Luminosity, but most people actually know them from their time as M80. When they were Luminosity, it was Alraz, Lion Blaze, and Kinsei. But heading into the winter split, they picked up Percy and made 2 consecutive top 8s. They were coached by Trey during this time under the banner of M80. But when they were Luminosity, they were coached by Rams. But one of the main reasons M80 is higher than some of the other teams with these similar played 7 regionals, best finish top 8 is because they actually made 2 top 8s. And most of the teams that we see from here on out have made multiple top 8s. Number 42 is another one of those teams to make multiple top 8s, and that's Koi. They placed 12th in North America. They played 8 regionals. They only missed the Fall Cup, I believe. Their best finish was top 8, getting a top 8 back in the fall, and another one in the spring, I believe. Or actually, that might have been winter when they beat Dignitas. This was a roster that was formerly known as Knights. They actually competed under the Knights banner for a long time with the core of Sosa and Cheese. They had Zanil during their time with Knights, but then they ended up doing a weird switch with the organization and Zanil Gyro trade. And so they ended up under the banner of Koi. They have Corrupted G as their coach now. They had McLando while they were on Knights. And another thing that this team has done is qualified for Gamers 8. and we will see them this weekend just like we will see SAW. So very curious to where that goes for them. Obviously, I did not include that in the RLCS season rankings, which is why they place at number 42. Number 41, you have Luna Galaxy. They were 9th in Europe. They played all 9 regionals, and their highest finish was a top 8 placement. This team competed under the banner of Sonics and Monkeys throughout the season. They primarily played with a roster of Matane, Smokes, and Arju, but heading into the spring split, they ended up replacing Arju with Raziers. A lot of people were expecting some results from this team. Specifically me, I was expecting some results from this team, and unfortunately, the spring split didn't exactly pan out as expected. But I'm curious to see where this team goes from the future because Smokes and Raziers are absolutely phenomenal talents, and Matane is consistently underrated. So we'll see what they can do next year. But for this year, they clock in at number 41. I have to stop saying clock in. I really do. Number 40 is Tundra. It's another one of those teams that ended up disbanding. They played 6 regionals, disbanded after the winter split. Their best finish was top 8, which they got a couple of times in the fall. This was a roster of Casio, Raziers, and Rizex, and they were coached by Freaky. Number 39 is Rebellion. This is absolutely the lowest we will see Rebellion on this list for a while, specifically the duo of Two Piece and Parth, which is one of the most hotly contested off-season spots in North America. They competed with Memory this year. Memory has already announced his retirement and moving into the coaching role for Rebellion for next year, actually. But for this season, they got 11th in North America. They played all 9 regionals, and they made multiple top 8s, including, I believe, every single top 8 in the spring split. So good on them, and I'm very curious to see how good this team is next year. Number 38, you have W7M. They got 5th in South America. They made 1 South American regional final, and they played in 6 different regionals. They were actually formed in the winter split, so they weren't able to make the first 3 regionals. This is a roster of Royales, Wisty, and Snips. Their 1 regional final in South America was in the Spring Cup, I believe, where they ended up losing to Ninjas Pajamas in 7. They were coached by Tander. Tander used to play for Furia back in the days of RLCS X, if you remember that name. But W7M is a very promising roster that couldn't quite get it going in South America, but getting up to 5th in points after only playing 2 splits is definitely an impressive feat that puts them at number 38. Number 37 is Geekay Esports. They got 4th in MENA for points, and they made 1 MENA regional final way back in the fall split. Back then, they were actually known as Twisted Minds with the roster of Zazonix, AMS, and Mawson. But throughout the season, they underwent 2 roster changes, so the roster looks almost completely different. It's now Zazonix, Talm, and Mesho. They have Rocket Dose as their coach now, but they used to have Beastbound as their coach. And they also went under the banner 5 heads before getting picked up by Geekay in the fall. But all these results have them placing number 37. Number 36 is Exceed, and I know they got 6th in South America and ended up getting passed by W7M, and you might be wondering why I have them higher than that team. They ended up making 2 SAM regional finals, including losing the tiebreaker to make the winter major for South America. So they had a really good winter split, despite not doing much of anything in the fall and unfortunately not being able to come up with the same results in the spring. This is a roster of KNS, Klaus, and Davitrox, and the main reason they are clocking in at number 36 is because their run in winter led them into the public eye for a decent amount of time, and was very excited to see them possibly do the impossible and make the winter major. At number 35, we have everybody's favorite European team in Hogan Mode. Let's go, bro, as it says on the most iconic logo of all time. This is a roster of Scrub, Killer, Growly, and Rezi. They got 14th in points for Europe, which is impressive considering they only played 2 European regionals. Their best finish was 3rd place in those. They got a top 6 and a top 3. And my honest opinion about this roster is that they would have made the spring major over Moist if they had qualified for that spring cup. So the fact that they got 14th in Europe overall for the season after only qualifying for 2 regionals, made a top 3 run, is a really impressive feat, and I had to clock them somewhere, and so they end up going at number 35. At number 34, we have NRG, and I know there's a lot of opinions on this roster, but they did get 9th in North America. They played 9 regionals. They got multiple top 4 finishes. This is a roster of Justin, Garrett G, and Squishy, with a coach of Epic Johnny by the end of the season. They had Sizz for approximately 1 regional, I believe. But with all these achievements, it puts them at number 34 for the year. Number 33 is PSG Tundra. They got 8th in Europe, played 9 regionals. Their best finish was top 4. They were formerly Evil Geniuses, and they had the roster the entire season of Catalysm, Ivan, and Tox, and they were coached by Verge. Number 32 is Nixuh. They were 4th in Sub-Saharan Africa. They got 1 regional win in the region, the only other team aside from Limitless to get a win in this regional. They had Mr. Low, Skill Steel, and Acreon. Skill Steel played at the World Championship last year. They were actually coached by Fisher as well, for those who didn't know. They were formerly known as Reformed back in the fall split. most people know their accomplishments when they were under the banner of Nixuh. And Mr. Lowe has already announced his retirement. So thank you for a good career. Congratulations on your one regional win in SSA. But Nixuh gets 32 for the year. Number 31 is DeToNator. They also took home a regional win, this time in APAC. They ended up getting 5th overall in APAC. So definitely a step down from where they were last year in terms of points. But they were able to get that regional win to put them at number 31 for the year. They stuck with the same roster for all 3 splits, with the roster of Burn, Makan, and Lunatic, and their coach Nixuh. Number 30 is Dignitas, and now we are on to the teams that have qualified for international competition this year. Dignitas was number 10 in North America in terms of points by the end of the year. They were top 16 at the Winter Major, which means they qualified for the Winter Major. They ended up going out last in their group, but considering that they qualified for the Major in what was the most stacked North American region to date, it's pretty impressive. Now, put aside the whole EU versus NA debate right now. I know the EU is better than North America at the top, but it is absolutely harder to make the majors in North America, in my opinion, considering you had 9 very solid teams at the beginning of the season, where it's like, it's hard to believe any of these teams are going to miss out on a top 8, and Dignitas came out of absolutely nowhere and made a land. So kudos to them. They're at number 30. They played all 9 regionals. Their best finish was top 4 in the Winter Open. This was Andy, Drees, and Evo for most of the season. They played with Delta back in the fall. They were coached by Violent Panda in the spring, but during their Winter Major run, they were coached by Nick, former coach of Moist and former coach of Furia, actually. Number 29 is Quadrant. They played 6 different regionals, then ended up disbanding after the winter split. They got top 14 at the fall major, and they made 1 regional final in Europe. They also qualified for the tiebreaker in Europe for the winter major, but ended up losing it to G1, who would go on to make the winter major. This is a roster of Cash, Relating Wave, and EXO, and I definitely felt the need to put this roster on here. Otherwise, Relating Wave wouldn't be anywhere, and he absolutely deserved a spot on the top 50 most successful teams. Cash ended up going to Moist later in the season. EXO to Oxygen. Snasky would go to Oxygen with him, but Quadrant, due to their performance in the fall and winter split, are number 29 on the year. Number 28 is Optic. They ended up getting 7th in North America and placed top 12 at the spring major. They played 9 regionals in North America, and their best finish was top 3. This was a roster with Reddles, AJ, and Magic Bear, and Rogreg as their coach. They're also playing in Gamers 8, so be sure to check them out this weekend as they hope to continue their good form that they found in spring, despite barely missing out on the World Championship. At number 27, we have Valiant. This is our first Worlds contending roster. They got 2nd in Sub-Saharan Africa. They ended up going out 0-3 in Worlds wildcard, and they made 5 different regional finals in Sub-Saharan Africa. This was a roster formerly under the banner of ATK in French class. They had Wordy, Wheelu, and Sweaty by the time they made Worlds, with Leoxy as their coach. And during the season, they also played with Gyazao and Galaxy. Number 26, you have Gaming Gladiators. They got 2nd in APAC. They also went out 0-3 in World's Wild Card. They went top 16 at the Winter Major, which means they qualified for it ahead of Elevate, which is still an amazing accomplishment for this Gladiators team. They won 2 different regionals in the APAC region, and they stuck with the same roster for the entire season with LCT, Maxu, and OSM. This team is also competing at Gamers 8, but LCT is now off the team. They announced that before Worlds, in fact, and it's now Flitz from North America stepping in. They're coached by Marky Duda, but they are playing this weekend, so just be sure to check them out. Number 25, you have Furia. They're 8th in North America. They're top 16 at the Spring Major, meaning they qualified, and they did end up winning a regional in North America. This was Card, Jan, and Lost. They played with Kaio at the beginning of the season. Their coach, STL. It was a very disappointing season for Furia compared to what their expectations were, but just due to the resume that they end up having, including a regional win and qualifying for a major, it still puts them at number 25 for the year. Number 24 for the year is G1. They were 7th in Europe. They went 2-3 in the World's Wild Card. They got top 16 at the Winter Major, which means they qualified and went last in groups. They played all 9 regionals, and their best finish was a top 4. By the end of the season, this was Atomic, Dorito, and Oli, but for most of the season, they played with Mark by 8. Number 23 is Ground Zero. This is one of the most heartbreaking teams I had to put on here. Then I couldn't put them higher. They got 3rd in OCE, including qualifying for the Spring Major and Winter Major. They qualified for every single regional final that they played as a team. They played 6 regionals together as they were formed in the winter. They won 3 regionals in OCE. They ended up getting 2nd in all the other ones. This was Super Lucky, Fiber, and Kaka. Number 22 is Limitless, the best team out of Sub-Saharan Africa. They ended up going 1-3 in World's Wild Card, and they had 8 regional wins in Sub-Saharan Africa, just one short of tying Falcons' record last year. This is a team formerly under the banner of May Contain Nuts for the first 2 regionals of the season. They had Snowy, Darth, and To Die For. At number 21 is Twisted Minds, and I know this is probably much lower than many people expected a Worlds main event team to be. But they ended up getting 3rd in MENA, top 16 at Worlds. They went 0-2 in the Worlds main event after going 3-2 through Wildcard. And they had 2 MENA regional finals. They were formerly Veloce and Vision Esports throughout the season. This was a roster of SMW, Senzo, and Venom, and they also played with Basil for a little bit. The main reason this team isn't higher is honestly because there were less opportunities for MENA to qualify for international events. If there were 2 MENA spots at lands, they would have qualified for the Spring Major and definitely would have better results. A, overall from getting more practice at international competition, but B, qualifying for more majors. So it's a little unfortunate that I had to place them this low, but considering we only really saw them at the World Championship, they didn't win anything in their own region, I do have Twisted Minds at number 21. At number 20, I have version 1, and this one's probably controversial as well. It's Beast Mode, Common Daniel. They played with Torment for most of the season and were coached by Fireburner, but they did get 6th in North America. They got top 8 at the Fall Major, and they had 2 regional wins in North America. That top 8 at the Fall Major is absolutely carrying them, all things considered, because this team was expected to do a lot better in the Spring Split and didn't do much of anything, which is kind of unfortunate for them. But I'm expecting a bounce back year from version 1 next year, and it starts this weekend at Gamers 8. At number 19, I have Pioneers. This was Scrub, Banana Head, and Hunter by the end of the year. They were formerly coached by JG7, and they also played with Super Locky. They were actually number 1 in OCE, but I don't have them as the highest ranked OCE team, just mainly based on international competition results. They went 1-3 in World's Wild Card. They qualified for the Fall and Winter Major, but didn't get any wins there, and they won 3 regionals in their home region. At number 18, I have Elevate, and they are 1 ahead of Pioneers for very specific reasons because they actually beat them in the World's Wild Card. Elevate went 2-3 in the World's Wild Card with that win over Pioneers. They got 1st in APAC. They qualified for the Spring and the Fall Majors, and they ended up winning 6 regionals in their home region of APAC. They were formerly James Cheese for the entirety of the Fall Split, and this was Virtuoso, Realize, and Kami with LVP as coach. At number 17, I have Power. They were 2nd in points for OCE, but they went 2-3 at the World's Wild Card, and they got a series win against Ground Zero at the Spring Major and went 2-3 at the Fall Major, placing top 11. They also got 3 OCE regional wins, and this was Amphis, Fever, and Torsauce. Now, it's not going to be this for next year, as we already know Fever and Torsauce have moved on from Amphis, but Amphis is still backed by the org. They were coached by Jimma. It'll be curious to see what happens with this roster next year, but for this year, they are number 17. At number 16, you have Oxygen, and this is the highest placing team that did not make the World's main event. They were 6th in Europe. They went 1-3 in Wild Card, and their major results mainly speak for themselves here. They got top 12 at the Winter Major and top 8 at the Fall Major. They won the very first EU regional of this year. By the end of the year, they were Archie, Jorias, and Ixo with Snasky as coach, but they were coached by Billy throughout most of the season, and they also played with Oli and Rise. At number 15, you have the Ninjas in Pajamas. That's Astromic, Bems, and Mata now. They were 1st in South America. They got top 16 at Worlds, which means they qualified for the Worlds main event. They got top 12 at the Spring Major, including beating the team that normally takes Astromic's teammates in Furia. And you got top 14 at the Fall Major. They got 5 South American regional wins, and they were formerly the club where they ended up sweeping the Fall Split in South America. But this roster of Astromic, Bems, and Mata played with Kiowa and lost throughout the year. At number 14, you have another South American team with Crew. It was very hard to separate all the South American teams. Crew ended up getting 2nd in South American points. They were 1 point behind Ninjas in Pajamas, but they had a little bit better international results where they got top 12 at Worlds, including beating the Ninjas. They got top 16 of the Spring Major, and they got top 8 at the Winter Major. They had 3 South American regional wins, and they played with Jufino, Drops, and Brad for most of the season. During the Fall Split, they did end up having Shad on the roster, but most people know this team from their winter and spring accolades. Number 13, you have your best placing South American team on the list. It goes a little backwards considering they were 3rd in South American points, but they got top 16 at Worlds, top 12 at the Winter Major, and most importantly, top 4 at the Fall Major, surprising most everyone in the world. They had only 1 South American regional win, but getting a top 4 at a major absolutely speaks for itself. This is a roster of Sad Knight and KV1, coached by Bruno. At number 12, you have Space Station Gaming. They were 5th in North America, and they got top 8 at Worlds, top 12 at the Spring Major, top 11 at Fall Major, and they made one regional final in North America. By the end of the season, this was LJ, Arsenal, and Hawkster, but they played with Daniel for most of the season. They were also coached by Chrome for most of the season, but when Hawkster came in, so did Sad Jr. as coach. This team definitely ramped up towards the end of the season, but due to the basis of their results throughout the entirety, they have to be placed at number 12. At number 11, you have G2 Esports. They were 4th in North America in terms of points. They made top 8 at Worlds. They made top 8 at Winter Major, and they made top 11 at the Fall Major. They made one regional final in North America as well, and this was a roster of JNash Chicago and Atomic. They were still coached by Sathu, and they made no changes from last year. Breaking into our top 10, the first team on there is RuleOne. They were number 1 in MENA. They were top 12 at Worlds. They got 4th at the Spring Major, and they had 4 MENA regional wins. This is a roster of Rawas, Kalirs, and Mawson, coached by Cresper. They also played with Natter for most of the season, and it's a little unfortunate that I have them lower than Falcons, considering they were the number 1 seed in MENA, but we'll get to why Falcons is ahead in just a second. I guess we're getting to that right now. Number 9 is Falcons. They got 2nd in MENA. They were top 8 at Worlds, which does speak slightly higher. They got top 12 at the Winter Major and top 14 at the Fall Major. So they ended up qualifying for more international competition, winning more regionals in MENA, and getting a higher placement at Worlds, which is why I had them just slightly above RuleOne despite the point rankings. This is a roster of Khaled, Ahmed, and TRK, but we already know they're making changes as they are playing with Nwippo at Gamers 8 this weekend. At number 8, you have Complexity. They got 3rd in North America. They made a top 12 run at the World Championship, and they got top 8 at the Spring Major and top 4 at the Winter Major. They won a singular North American regional, and they played with a roster of AGG, Razebull, and CRR. At number 7, you have Moist Esports. They got 5th in Europe, but they had a lot of results throughout the year. They got top 12 at Worlds. They got top 6 at the Spring Major, and their most notable result was in the Fall Major, where they ended up being the Grand Finals. They played 9 different regionals. Their best finish was a top 4, but getting 2nd at a major absolutely speaks for itself as well. This was a roster Joyo, Juicy, and Cash by the end of the year, but throughout the year they also played with Rise and Astral and were coached by Noah. At number 6, you have your World Championship 2nd place team in Team BDS. They got 4th in Europe, and as I just said, 2nd at Worlds. They also got 2nd at the Spring Major and made a regional final in Europe. This is a roster of Monkey Moon, Seiko, and Rise for the Spring Split. For the Fall and Winter, they played with Extra, but he transitioned into a coaching role alongside Mew. And despite the fact that this team really only found success in the Spring Split, their accolades and consistent performance level up during the Spring Split puts them at number 6 for the year. At number 5, you have FaZe Clan. Despite everything that's happening with this team right now, they still have a lot of accolades to their name. They got 2nd in North America, top 16 at Worlds, which means they qualified for the World's main event throughout their points and didn't really win any series there, but that's besides the point. They got 2nd at the Winter Major and top 4 at the Fall Major, and they won the most regionals in North America at 3. This was a roster of First Killer, Sipical, and Mist. They were coached by Chrome for only the World Championship, but throughout the rest of the season, they were coached by Roldiz. At number 4, you have Team Liquid. They got 3rd in European points, and they were one of the 3 teams this season to qualify for every single international competition. They got top 4 at Worlds, top 8 at the Spring Major, top 4 at the Winter Major, and top 8 at the Fall Major. They won 2 different European regionals, that being the Fall Invitational and the Winter Invitational, and the players on this roster were Chronic, Atau, and Oski, and they were coached by Xpere. At number 3, you have your highest placing North American team in GenG. They got number 1 in points for North America, and their accolades included a top 8 at Worlds, a top 6 at the Spring Major, a top 8 at the Winter Major, and Fall Major champions. They also won 2 regionals back in North America, that being the Fall Invitational and the Winter Open. This was a roster of apparently Jack, Chronic, and Nolly, and they were coached by Illusion. At number 2, you have Carmine Core. They were number 1 in points for Europe. They got top 4 at Worlds, 3rd at the Spring Major. They won the Winter Major and top 8 at the Fall Major. They won 3 different European regionals, and they played with the roster of Vatira, Itachi, and Exotic, coached by Eversax. And of course, no surprises, the number 1 successful team of the year is Team Vitality. Despite the fact that this team did not qualify for the Fall Major, they had an absolute ramp up of a season throughout the end. They got 2nd in European points, and they were World Champions, Spring Major Champions. They got a top 8 at the Winter Major before Zen even came in. 3 EU regional wins. They only played 8 regionals in Europe. They actually failed to qualify for the Fall Open, but they have not lost a single event with their current roster. Alpha 54, Radosin, and Zen, coached by Farah. Sizen was a great stand-in for the fall and winter splits and helped them get to that winter major, but this team is undoubtedly the best team in the world currently and have been for the last few months, and that puts them as your most successful team of 2022-2023 season. And that's it. Thank you all for watching. I'll catch you all later.